Welcome back to the Too Tall Sports Podcast. Glad to have you. Appreciate you listening as always. Big time episode today. Former 10-year NFL vet Randy Grimes. He was a center for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in the 80s and early 90s. Went through an addiction phase, came out of it. Now he's a public speaker. He's got a brand new book out. I'll get to that in about 10 or 15 minutes from now after my 2 cents segment. But stick around because this interview is very, very good. And it's a great story and lesson for everybody that knows someone dealing with addiction and how to get out of it and having the confidence to come forward and ask for help. And as Randy will say in the episode, raise their hand and ask. So this is a phenomenal episode. Lucky to have Randy, but I got to give you my 2 cents first. So let's get to it. I'm going to talk about Tom Brady a little bit coming back and also my picks for March Madness. I know it's a crapshoot, but hey, I got to give you at least, some recorded, documented stuff as the tournament starts today. All right, let's get to my 2 cents about Tom Brady. Tom Brady never said in his multi-page statement at the end of this season after that tough loss to the LA Rams in the playoffs that he was going to quote unquote retire. Tom Brady just said he doesn't have time or for the commitment or he said competitive commitment. That's what he used. He just can't do it anymore, but he never said the word retire. And that was the first clue where I was like, I don't think he's done yet. Plus, how about this? He led the league in passing yards with 5,300 plus, and he led the league in passing touchdowns with over 40. So his game has not declined at all. Now, I did give him a nice send-off in one of my 2 cents a couple weeks ago, also giving some perspective, not trying to be a hater, but giving perspective of it wasn't all because of him in New England. Belichick, I'd give half the Super Bowls to, I give the other half to Brady. But I'm actually not mad at this at all. He didn't drag it out too long. It took, a couple months, if that. I hope he doesn't turn into a Brett Favre situation where it's every year someone's got to go down and convince him to keep playing. I don't think it'll be like that. I never thought he really wanted to leave the game. He knows there's a lot left on the table. They still have a really good team. There's guys moving on and getting paid, a couple guys retiring. But what Tampa does for Tom is they put the pieces around him that he needs. Offensive line, they just signed more receivers. So they're going to give him what he needs to be successful, and they should. He's, the greatest quarterback of all time, even though I'm still an Aaron Rodgers guy. But still, Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. And it just goes to show you when you really know, and Tom Brady is saying, I'm not there yet. Mentally, I am so crafted and so calculated in my preparation, the way I approach the game. And he still has that burning desire to play. And so even though he's going to be 45 when the season starts, which is, never been done before, he's still at the top of his game. And I can't fault him for wanting to play again. He's still great. It's not like there's, old superstars we've seen in the past where they're hobbling to make it to the finish line. Not saying this is the case with Big Ben Roethlisberger, but let's be real. You knew this was the end for Big Ben, right? He didn't really age well. He got hit a lot. He didn't take care of his body as well as Brady does. And no one takes care of their body at the quarterback position as well as Brady does. That's why he's lasted so long. He doesn't take big hits. He gets the ball out of his hands quickly. There's a reason why Tom Brady has lasted as long as he has. And his arm is still great. So physically, it's still there. Mentally, it's still there. Why not? Why not keep playing? So maybe some of you thought I would have been like, oh, why is he? I don't want to see Tom Brady anymore. Do we need him to move forward in football? No. The game will move on without you. And there's plenty of young QBs that we've discussed in the past to take the throne, so to speak, from Tom Brady when he is done. But if you're still great, then go keep playing. Why not? He's got nothing to prove. He loves the game. So anyways, not mad at Tom Brady for continuing to play. All right, let me get to the fun stuff now. My March Madness picks. Obviously, it's the greatest time of the year in sports, I think. There's nothing better than March Madness. Survive and advance. One and done. Every game is an elimination game. It's awesome. So let me give you, I'm not going to give you all my picks because that would bore you to death. Kind of like fantasy football. No one really cares. But I will give you some of the games that I think could be potential upsets happening in the different regions of the bracket. So let's start in the West, where Gonzaga is the 1 seed. I have them going all the way to the Final Four. I'll start with that. I'll explain what I think is going to happen to them later. I do see Texas Tech, the 3 seed, meeting Duke in the Sweet 16 and beating Duke. I think Texas Tech, I like old teams, as you will see my pattern here. I like veteran teams in the tournament. Young teams rarely win in the NCAA tournament. So I got Gonzaga beating Texas Tech in the Elite Eight to get to the Final Four in the West. In the East side of the region, the East region part of the bracket, excuse me, Baylor's the 1 seed. I believe they're going to go all the way back to the Final Four. I believe they will beat Kentucky in the Elite Eight to get there. A fun matchup is going to be Murray State, which I had to look up this past weekend, is in Kentucky. Murray State, if they win their first game against San Francisco and Kentucky wins their first game, it's going to be a battle of Kentucky schools, Murray State versus Kentucky, which will be interesting. I do have, I guess, my upset pick in that bracket. I think St. Mary's is going to beat UCLA. I don't see it with UCLA. I know they overperformed and overachieved last year. I don't see it. I like St. Mary's there to beat UCLA and then lose to Baylor. I also like Virginia Tech to beat Purdue. Purdue's kind of limping into the playoffs right now. Virginia Tech is hot. They just won the ACC championship. I know the ACC is down, but I like teams that are playing well right now going into the tournament. Either way, I still have Kentucky beating Va Tech and Baylor beating Kentucky to get to the Final Four, and they will play Gonzaga. Let's move to the South. I like Arizona to go pretty far. I think they will end up meeting Tennessee, who is kind of, I guess, not really a sleeper, but Villanova's the 2 seed. I don't see them as a real legit 2 seed, to be honest. I don't think they can score with the other teams. I like Tennessee to beat Villanova. And then my surprise kind of the bracket is Tennessee just getting on a roll. They won the SEC championship. Their strength of schedule is like top 5 in the country because the SEC at the top in college basketball was really strong. I think Tennessee is going to shock the world, beat Arizona, and go as a 3 seed to the Final Four, where they will meet my eventual Final Four pick from the Midwest region, which is Kansas. I think Kansas is going to have a pretty smooth ride. They are going to face a hot Iowa team, in my opinion. Iowa's going to beat Providence in the second round, and Iowa's going to meet Kansas in a tough game, but Kansas is going to win. I also, Wisconsin has a really easy draw. They're a 3 seed with a game in Milwaukee, which is basically a home game, and they're going to play Iowa State in the second round. I see Auburn getting through USC eventually, and then Auburn beating Wisconsin, and then Auburn losing to Kansas. So not a huge surprise here, but I have all the number ones, Gonzaga, Baylor, and Kansas, and Tennessee as the 3 seed, rounding out my Final Four. In the championship, though, I have Gonzaga beating Baylor, and I have Kansas beating Tennessee, and then Gonzaga will finally cut down the nets as a national champion. I'll even give you a score. I think it's going to be like 74-68, somewhere in there. I like Gonzaga. If not now, then when? I think this has got to be their time. The only tough test, if you believe in Duke, is them getting there. I think they can beat Baylor on that side of the bracket. So give me Gonzaga to cut down the nets at the national championship game. Let me know what you guys think. Hit me up at Too Tall Sports Podcast. Would love to hear your feedback. I don't want to hear your whole bracket, just like you don't want to hear all of mine, but I'd like to hear your Final Four. I think it's interesting to see what people think, but you could blindfold yourself and pick it better than me anyway. So good luck. Enjoy the tournament. It's one of my favorite times of the year, so I'm really excited for it. But what I'm really excited for is this interview that's about to come up in a couple minutes with Randy Grimes. Buckle up, because the second half of it is intense, but it's great and worth it. And everybody should hear this story. So let's get to my interview with Randy Grimes. Now, this is an interview you're going to want to hear. My guest today is Randy Grimes. He is a former Tampa Bay Buccaneers NFL player. He played center for them for 10 years down in Tampa in the NFL. He also went to Baylor University, but he also dealt with serious addiction to pain pills during and after his career and almost lost his life multiple times. He eventually got out of it. He's written a book called Off Center, which you guys can look up. And he's also got a program called Pro Athletes in Recovery, helping athletes transition from addiction and when they leave sports and losing their identity. This is one of the more powerful interviews I've done. He's very open about his story, and I couldn't be more grateful to have him on. So he's a public speaker now. Really, really cool, in-depth, but a reality check episode for people that know somebody. Everyone knows someone with, possibly that has dealt with addiction before in their life. So one of the more interesting episodes that I've ever done. So you guys are really going to love this. As always, I got to plug my stuff at Too Tall Sports Podcast. You can follow me there on Instagram. On TikTok, it's also at Too Tall Sports Podcast. Hit me up there. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. Check out my YouTube channel, Too Tall Sports Podcast. If you could subscribe, like, comment, share, rate, review wherever you can. I would love to hear your feedback, what you guys think of the episodes. I don't always get to see who my listeners are, so I'm just curious what you guys' thoughts are, but you'll definitely like this one. And then on the audio side of things, so if you want to watch the interviews, it's going to be on YouTube. On the audio side, it's going to be Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. We're probably there. Just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. If you could, I know I always remind you guys, hit the 5 stars if you haven't already. So on Apple, just scroll down on the main page, Too Tall Sports Podcast, find those stars, hit the 5. And if you want to leave a review, that'd be great as well. Helps the show. Spotify does offer ratings now. So it's right on the top of the page. When you click on the show, Too Tall Sports Podcast, hit the 5 stars there. That'd be awesome if you could do that as well. Like I mentioned, I make tons of videos on TikTok and Instagram. So at Too Tall Sports Podcast, find me there. But with that, buckle up your seatbelts for my incredible interview with Randy Grimes. All right, my next guest is a former NFL player who played 10 seasons with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He played his college ball at Baylor University. He's originally from Tyler, Texas, and he's got an amazing story from dealing with addiction to recovering and now into a prominent keynote speaker. And he also has a brand new book out called Off Center. I'm happy to have him. He is Randy Grimes. Great to have you on the show, Randy.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. What a great opportunity. I appreciate it.
For sure. Glad to have you. Your story is incredible, which we will definitely get to. And I wanted to mention on camera, I played minor league baseball with Randy's son-in-law, Garrett. So a little cool connection there. And the sports world is just small, isn't it?
Small world, right? Yes. It really is. And that was out in Reno, right?
In Reno. Yep, exactly. So I wanted to mention
the first time y'all had ever crossed paths?
Yeah, because we didn't get drafted in the same organization together. I think he was with the Nationals for a while, and then I started with Seattle, and we both ended up, when you get older, you start moving around. So
right.
Yeah. But before we get to your upbringing and all your story, you do have a new book out, like I mentioned, called Off Center. You played center, which is, in the NFL. Tell us about the book and kind of what led you to wanting to be an author and write about your story.
Well, and here's a copy of the book, and you can go to offcenterthebook.com, or and that has a link on it that'll take you to the Amazon link, or you can just go to Amazon.com and look up Off Center. But it was something. It was a 3-year labor of love, and it was something that my whole family had a platform in. It was really kind of a healing process for the Grimes family to do this. So, whether it sells a copy or not, it's already served its purpose. But, there's something for everybody in this book. Instead of just saying that I was born in Tyler, Texas, and I got sober September 22nd, 2009, I didn't want to just do a timeline. I wanted to do a story because I wanted everybody to get something out of it. So I told my story through the eyes of an intervention that me and my wife are doing. And, there's a character in there that reflects everybody that's struggling with addiction or loved one with addiction. There's an enabler, there's codependency, there's that character that doesn't believe it's a disease, that thinks it's a moral failing. There's that angry person that's been affected by addiction that way. And there's all these characters. So there's something for everybody in there. And man, we're just so pleased with how it turned out. It's really great. It's been real successful. The reviews have been awesome. And, it's only been out since February 8th. We released it out at the Super Bowl in Los Angeles. And it's just doing great. We're already at bestseller level. We're already #1 in like over 7 categories. So it couldn't be. And, when you start something like this, you don't know how it's going to be received.
Sure. Yeah.
Here I am pouring my guts out into 234 pages, and you don't know how it's going to be received. But man, so far it's been awesome, and the reviews have been great.
That's good. And you've built a big following based on your story, and you've already been, like I mentioned, a public speaker. So it's not like you're coming out of the blue with your story. A lot of people have heard at least some of your story before. So for you to be able to deliver something like that for everybody, I think, once we get into it, you'll see something, everybody either knows somebody or has dealt with in their own life. So I think there's a lot there for you.
Yeah. And, no matter where I speak and I ask people to raise their hand if they've been affected by addiction in any way, every hand goes up. Everybody knows somebody, whether it's a loved one or a spouse or a child or even a neighbor or a work companion, it's everybody knows somebody.
Right. Exactly. And so now we're going to talk about how we got to that position in your life. And as I mentioned, you grew up in Texas where football is life. So what do you remember about the early days of playing football at a young age, and maybe ultimately up to your high school years of when you really started getting passionate and what position you might play, and just how did football kind of evolve for you?
Yeah, and football wasn't religion in my house, but it was a close second. I mean, religion was religion, and then there was football. Sure. Everything kind of centered around football, Friday night lights, being in between those bleachers and under the lights. And, football came easy for me. I had a dad who was a parole officer, but he should have been a coach. He missed his calling as a coach, and had a brother, an older brother that played, who was a great tight end in high school, went off and played college ball at Southern Arkansas. And so football was, just part of our life, and everything kind of focused around that. And it came easy for me. And, I started seeing scouts come around my junior year in high school. They were looking at the seniors, and, it kind of, I kind of realized that maybe I could, maybe go to the next level and play this game that I love so much. And sure enough, I had the opportunity to go and play anywhere in the Southwest Conference that I wanted to. There was Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Arkansas, Rice, Houston, TCU, all those schools. And I chose Baylor because I wanted to play for Grant Taft, and I had a sister there. And being the good Southern Baptist that I was, I wanted to make my mama proud by going to a good Baptist school.
Gotcha.
But, I had a great career at Baylor, played with some awesome players, some guys that went on, some Hall of Famers, Singletary, some All-Pros that went on and played, had some great years in the league, Abercrombie. And again, football came easy for me. I had a great senior year. I started seeing the scouts come around. I got serious about maybe could I make a living playing a kids game, And, sure enough, I had a great senior year. I started working with the track coach. I started getting ready for my combines, for times, for vertical jumps, for standing broad jumps, all the different things I was going to have to do at the combine. And sure enough, I had great combines, and that's what really moved me up in the draft. And, I was lucky enough to be drafted in the second round, 45th player selected, second center taken in the 1983 draft. And, I was excited about the fact I was going to Tampa because they had just gone to the playoffs in 82.
Right.
It was a strike shortened year, but still they were a playoff contender. So little did I know what the next 10 years was going to be like.
Yes. And we will get to that, but I want to go back. I know you gave us a lot on that answer, but I do want to go back. So how did you know you're picking center was going to be your position? Why was that so natural for you?
I think center kind of picked me. I don't remember ever just saying, "Hey, I want to be a center."
Right. Most people don't.
Nobody says that. Right.
No.
And I think the fatter I got, the slower I got, but the meaner I got, I was just natural to be at center. And, it was a natural progression, I guess, because what was crazy is that in high school, I played defensive end and center. So I was not the skinniest center out there, but I was a heck of a defensive end. But when the scouts started looking around at me, they saw potential at being a great offensive lineman, and that's what everybody wanted me to do, was play center. And, you don't just walk in if you're a guard or a tackle and say you want to play center. That's something you got to kind of get used to and get good at. And it's got to be just second nature to be able to snap the ball and block at the same time.
Right. And you got to make all the calls too on the line. You got to be in sync with your quarterback.
Right.
I mean, not that I played on the offensive line or I played football organized for that matter, but you got to be very in sync with a lot of things versus just blocking only. So is that something that
you've got to know as much as the quarterback does about the defense you're facing. You got to be able to change blocking schemes or do audibles for the offensive line, get guys going in the right direction. Yeah, you're basically the quarterback of the offensive line.
Yeah, exactly. And so you ended up, like you said, going to Baylor, and I saw you were an All-American center, I believe. Was it your senior year?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was it like for you, just to talk about the Baylor piece, once you got there as a freshman, sophomore, just getting into college, what was your college life like at Baylor?
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I met my wife the very first day of my freshman year.
Oh, really?
We went out that night. Yeah, the students hadn't even come on campus yet, and I was still in training camp in 2-a-days. And she came up for welcome week. I met her. We went out that night, and then we got married after our junior year. And so but my college life was great. I mean, we had a lot of fun. We had some great teammates. Won the Peach Bowl in '79. Went on and won the Southwest Conference in 1980, and then got creamed by Alabama in the Cotton Bowl. Okay. And then my junior and senior year, we weren't that great. I think we were over a 500 ball club, but I was having great years. I was moving up in the draft. And, I had some great coaching. I played with a lot of great players, had a great time on campus, just barely made it through there with the sake of, with my wife helping me grade wise and all that. So, but that experience was awesome. And, I wouldn't trade those 4 years for anything.
Yeah, definitely. Are you still entrenched in Baylor stuff? Like if they're doing well, are you still paying attention?
Oh yeah, man. Especially now when they're doing so good,
Yeah.
And of course the basketball teams are doing great.
Yeah, they won it all last year, right?
Yeah. And then Coach Aranda took us to Big 12 champions last year. All the stuff that Coach Bryles did back when he was there, the Big 12 championships. And last weekend, I was inducted as a distinguished alumni in the Baylor Hall of Fame. So
very cool.
I was already in the athletic Baylor Hall of Fame. So to be recognized for the work I do now with the Alumni Hall of Fame that was an even bigger honor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anytime you can get that honor, that's really cool. You mentioned the draft earlier, which we'll get to, the 1983 NFL draft. You go in the second round to Tampa. What do you remember about the draft process, maybe, or draft day? Did you have a clue where you're going to go, or what were you hearing leading up to it?
No, I thought I could go to Dallas.
Okay.
Dallas was talking to me, and we really thought we were going to go there, but you never know. You never know what's going on. And I do remember that '83 draft as being the most awesome draft ever.
It's one of them, right? Yeah.
Great quarterbacks in that draft, and a lot of Hall of Famers too. Yeah. But I can remember we were in our little duplex in Waco, Texas, sitting by a telephone. And draft's a lot different nowadays. They've got green rooms and private jets and and these big productions that the NFL puts on and ESPN. But I remember sitting just by a telephone waiting for it to ring in a little duplex, me and my wife, and that's it. And I can still remember Coach McKay calling me, and he had that old cigar stained voice and all raspy and everything. And all he said was, "Hey Randy, this is Coach McKay, or this is John McKay from Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We just drafted you in the second round. See you tomorrow." Click. And I was like, "Whoa, wait, where's Tampa?"
Had you been to Florida before that?
No. As a matter of fact, no.
Yeah. So it was whole new. You were at Texas, everything at that point.
Hey, I was a kid from East Texas who had never even seen the ocean. So here I was going to this seaside community of Tampa, Florida, and we were going to start our lives together, our career in pro football, our family. So we were excited, man. We loaded up everything in a little U-Haul and hooked it up to our Cutlass Supreme, and out I-10 East we went.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I did hear you say in another interview, as nice as all that sounds, the Bucs were not very good during your 10 years there, whether it was bad picks or coaching or whatever the reasons were. How would you describe the 80s and with the Bucs?
We were a revolving door of players, coaches, front office people, quarterbacks. I had 5 different head coaches in 10 years. I had 6 different offensive line coaches. Probably had 10 different quarterbacks get up underneath me in a game time situation. I had 3 general managers. So we were a revolving door, man. And how do you ever get any consistency going with that kind of turnover? My best year was 6-10. And, I played with a lot of great guys, had some great coaches. Tampa was a great community to raise our family. And we only lived there half the year. We'd move back to Houston the other half. But, thinking back, though, as crappy as we were, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And there wasn't any free agency back then. You couldn't move around like the guys do now.
Got it. Okay. So I was curious.
So spending a whole decade with one team, that wasn't uncommon back then, other than to have a 10-year career. But you couldn't move around like they do now.
So knowing like what these guys do now, do you think you maybe would have tried to sign a free agent contract somewhere else for the?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
I would want, I wanted to go and get a ring somewhere.
Right.
That's what it's all about, is that ring.
Yeah.
And, when we went on strike in 1987, we sat out those 7 games. And when you miss 7 paychecks out of 16, it stings a little bit.
Yeah.
But everything that we went on strike for, those guys are reaping the benefits of now. And that's free agency and the ability to move around like they do.
And centers get paid a lot now.
They get paid more than I did.
Yeah. I mean, they get they're so important, offensive linemen in general, obviously left tackles or, all that. But these guys are making decent money now.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they're considered a skill position, right?
Yeah. No, it's important, especially if you had a quarterback that trusts you. It's like in baseball, a catcher, some guys have their catcher that's they trust and they call the game well. It's a similar thing, I'm guessing.
Right.
As things would turn for you in your career, you've been very open about your, addiction to pain pills and all that stuff. I'm just curious, when did that all start and what kind of injuries were you dealing with?
Well, and I remember the first conversation I ever had with a real pro, and it was Leroy Selman. I had a locker next to him my rookie year. And the first thing I learned from Leroy was that football was no longer a game. It was now a job, and you had to look at it like that. The second thing I learned from him was you do whatever you have to stay out on the field, because you don't want to get that reputation of always being on the injury report, always missing practice, always in line to see the team doctor, or being worked on by a team trainer, hanging out in the training room. You didn't want to get that reputation, because you were sure to have a short NFL career. So I'm sure Leroy didn't mean to take handfuls of pain pills every day, but that's what I did. And I practiced through those injuries. And, I played back in an era where we beat the hell out of each other all week long. And then hopefully there was enough left in the tank to play on Sunday. And that was the era, that was the culture, that old Bear Bryant Junction boy mentality, where if you don't practice hard, you're not going to play hard. So they practiced the crap out of us in the heat and everything else. So most of the injuries that we got back then happened during practice, and that blew my mind that coaches would treat their biggest commodity, like that. But that was the mentality. So there was a lot of injuries that happened during practice, a lot of nicks and bruises and different things I was not going to let anything keep me out of practice. And because that's when somebody else is going to take your job. So I was taking handfuls of pain pills every day, and I would just work right through it, practice right through it, play right through it. And, I justified it because I was getting it from team trainers or team doctors or teammates. Or we had an open drug safe in the middle of our locker room, so I could just go get it myself if nobody handed it to me. And that went on for probably 8 years. And it progressed. And I looked at it like a necessary evil, and I justified it because I wanted to be the best center that ever played the game. I wanted to feed my family. I wanted that next fat contract. I wanted to be all pro. I wanted all those things. And I had to be out on the field to get them. And that's the way I justified it. I looked at it like a necessary evil instead of what it really was, which was an addiction.
Right. Now, do you know, I'm not sure how many concussions centers got, but did you have a number of those as well?
Oh, I've had 20 documented concussions since high school. Yeah.
Wow. I don't know. Is that a lot compared to others?
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's pretty excessive. Yeah.
Yeah. But
that's believe it or not, I mean, everything seems to be working okay.
You sound great. You sound like you still, got all your wits about you.
Yeah, well, my wife might tell you something different, but
she gets to see you every day. I get to see you for a little bit. So from what I can see, you're doing fine. But man, that's a lot of concussions. And like you said, there's that stigma about being the tough guy and you got to stay on the field, out of the training room, all that stuff. How did that affect you mentally, that you were did you just not feel job security, or you just felt like that's the way it was in the 80s? I can't be around any doctors. I'm going to stay away as much as possible.
Well, I mean, nobody has job security in the NFL or any other sport. There's always somebody trying to take your job.
Sure.
NFL stands for not for long. So you can't give anybody an opportunity to take your position out there.
Right.
So, yeah, there's never job security. But you know what? Front office people and owners put pressure on the medical staff to get a player back out there earlier than he should probably. Coaches put pressure on team doctors to get somebody back out on the field, but nobody puts more pressure on themselves than the player does to get back out there. I mean, and that's a lonely feeling to be in that training room and not be with your buddies, not be part of that camaraderie and that brotherhood that's hanging out in the locker room when you're laying on a training table with stem on you and everybody else is getting suited up to go out to practice. That's a lonely feeling,
right?
And you don't want to have any part of that. And I wasn't going to let it happen.
Now, in the off season, I was curious, not during your games or practices, were you still taking pills during the off season as well?
Oh yeah. I mean, you don't just stop that,
Right.
And,
the same amount.
And I still had injuries going then too,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I saw you, you mentioned about in, I believe, 92, after the Bucs released you, it was so abrupt and sudden. Either the GM or the coach basically said, we don't need you anymore. How did you handle that mentally? And then everything kind of went crazy after that.
Yeah, I didn't handle it well at all, and I call it transitional trauma. That's not a medical word. I just made it up, but that's exactly what it was. And I remember Sam Weiss, he was my last coach, putting his hand on my shoulder and saying, we won't be needing you in Tampa anymore. And I remember just raking everything out of my locker into a black trash bag and walking out the back door. And Randy Grimes, the football player, didn't exist anymore. And, it's, I remember thinking, wow, that's how it ends. All the blood, sweat, and tears that I've left on football fields all over this country since fourth grade. And that's how it ends, with a coach that I don't even like, who doesn't like me, who's only been here a year. I have no loyalties to him. He has none to me.
Sure.
And he puts his hand on my shoulder. He hardly even stopped and looked me in the eye, and that's how it ends. And that's how it ended. And I walked out the back door, and man, I struggled with that for a long time, with who am I when I don't have those pads to put on anymore, or that playbook to look at, or that itinerary to go by. Who am I and how do I contribute? And what's my identity? And what am I going to get my self-worth from?
Yeah.
And that was throwing gas on an already raging dumpster fire that was the addiction. And now you throw in this lack of identity and the depression that goes with that. And it fueled that addiction for many years. And, the injuries just kept getting worse. The chronic pain just kept getting worse in my retirement. And, it's the tolerance to the medication kept getting higher. So I needed more and more all the time. I was doctor shopping all over Houston, and you could get away with that back then. And that was a full-time job, and the new normal for me was emergency rooms and ambulance trips and car wrecks and seizures. And I mean, I couldn't stop the chaos.
What I think is insane is that you made it from 92 all the way to what you detailed in 2009 as the rock bottom.
Right.
So I can't believe you made it as long as you did.
Well, I can't either.
Right. Like, that is a long time to be going through that cycle. Was it just that? I mean, what else did you have? I'm sure did you start having kids and all that came into play as well?
Yeah. I mean, I already had my kids, but they were growing up, and, we were busy doing school stuff and sports stuff and little league and volleyball and, all the stuff that you do. I was working, had a great job, was maintaining that somehow. But then it just kind of all went to hell. And, and it gets to that point with everybody, you can maintain it for a little while, but eventually you're going to lose control of it, and it's going to overtake you. And the consequences were getting worse and worse and worse all the time.
Sure. And if you're okay, I want to read the famous quote that you have from your book that you detailed. And you said, quote, "I prayed to God to open up the doors of heaven to let me in. Instead, he opened up the gates of hell and let me out." End of quote. That's a crazy, very powerful quote there. Tell us what that meant to you.
Well, and I should have died so many times, accidental overdoses, car wrecks, seizures that I had. I mean, there was plenty of opportunities there. And, I got to tell you that, Brett, at some point, at some of those points, I was ready. I just wanted the madness to end. I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted the chaos to quit. And, it wasn't until that spring and summer of 2009, that I finally put up my hand and asked for help. But that was at the very end. I mean, I had hit rock bottom so many times, and every bottom that I hit had a trap door in it. I just kept getting lower and lower and lower. And, my wife couldn't stand by and watch me kill myself anymore. She just couldn't sit by and watch. She had to go. And my daughter wouldn't let me, Garrett's wife, wouldn't let me come around her first grandkid because I wasn't fit to be around them. I was having seizures like every day practically. I'd lost another house as a result of addiction. And, I can remember laying in the floor of that house. We had moved all the furniture out. The new owners weren't going to take it for another 90 days. I remember laying in the floor of that dark house with no utilities, no furniture, laying on the floor thinking, I was an All-American in college. I was a second-round draft pick. I was 1988 NFL Man of the Year. I was, I had two great kids. I had a wife that loved me. And here I am laying in the floor of this vacant house with no utilities, no car, no job, no nothing, no money in the bank or anything. That's what it's come to. And that's when I finally put my hand up and asked for help.
Well, kudos to you for finally doing that, because I'm glad you got through that time in your life. And it was obviously you felt like you lost everything. And that's a horrible feeling to have, I'm sure.
Well, and some of us have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes it takes that, and there's different situations in life where you have to hit rock bottom in other ways for you to be like, now I need to start something new. So that's incredible that you got through that. What happened next after you went to that facility and then started your recovery?
Well, and I remember pulling up to that facility. My wife was willing to make one more call for me. I mean, she was sick of my behavior and everything else that was going on and everything I was putting her through. But she was willing to make one more phone call. And whoever she talked to that day at the league office up on Park Avenue, back then the NFL didn't have any resources for former players. But whoever she talked to that day, that's how I got to that treatment center in September the 22nd, 2009. And I pulled up to that treatment center. I flew into Fort Lauderdale and drove up to West Palm Beach. And I was leaning against the door of the car, and I was so sick, man. I was so sick. By the time I got there and then drove an hour north, I was so sick. And somebody opened that car door from the outside, and I just kind of fell out. There was about another 40 feet to get through the door of that facility, and I crawled on all fours. And nobody helped me, and I'm glad they didn't, because that was the greatest accomplishment I ever did, was crawling from that car door in those doors that night. And I remember hearing somebody say, Randy, in order to get that, and I don't remember much about that night, but I do remember hearing somebody say, you've got to have the desperation of a drowning man. And I, that didn't mean much to me as far as what it was supposed to. But I remember as a kid, my most vivid childhood memory as a 8-year-old kid in Tyler, Texas, I fell off one of those paddle boats, one of those things you take out on the lake and paddle, pedal with your feet.
Yeah.
And I fell off of that thing, and I got my feet caught up in something on the bottom of the lake. And I remember how I was screaming underwater and how I clawed at the water, and, how I fought with every fiber of my body, the desperation I had to get back to the surface. And that's what I thought of that night, and that was my most vivid childhood memory. And when I heard that night, that you have to have the desperation of a drowning man, I've been there. And, that really hit me, that not only was I in for the fight of my life, and I think I'm a pretty tough guy. I mean, I've been in a lot of battles. You don't get to stay in the league for 10 years unless you're winning most of those. But crawling in the door that night, that was the toughest thing I ever did, but it was also the most rewarding.
Wow. That is some crazy stuff. That's powerful that you had all the symbolism there, and you had to kind of unlock a memory, and it brought you back.
I got a great story about Pat
Yeah.
Summerall. Pat Summerall told me a story once about his neighbor in Dallas, and how his neighbor was in he was in organ failure. He was on his third marriage. His new wife was his drinking buddy. So he got Pat Summerall was a longtime alcoholic, but also a guy in long-term recovery. But he got some friends together from his local AA group. They went over and did an intervention on this guy, and they got him to treatment out to the Betty Ford Clinic. And it was Mickey Mantle. And 90 days later, when Mickey Mantle walked out of the Betty Ford Clinic, there was a crowd of people standing there waiting on him. And, this was before HIPAA, and all this was back in the early 80s, And he walked up to this crowd, and he could have gone out the back door. There was a car waiting for him, but he had something he wanted to say to this crowd. And as he walked up, somebody said, "Hey, Mickey, what do you most want to be remembered for?" And everybody was expecting some baseball related answer or something. But Mickey said, "I want people to realize that getting clean and sober was the greatest accomplishment I ever did." So it's a pretty cool story. And that's kind of how I felt that night,
Yeah, no, that is a big accomplishment, because football is just a sport for you. You're fighting for your life. That's a
it's
different
just life
thing.
and death. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even over the birth of my children, my marriage, football accolades, I mean, because if I don't crawl in the door that night, then all that other stuff was for nothing. And I'd be remembered as a drug addict,
Yeah, for sure. You brought up Mickey Mantle and Pat Summerall, and just reminds us that a lot of athletes do struggle in silence or struggle transitioning out of sports. So you created an organization called Pro Athletes in Recovery. Tell us about your leadership there and what you wanted to do with that organization.
Well, and I thought of this while I was in treatment. I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but I knew there was a lot of other guys out there just like me who were, like you said, struggling in silence. And for whatever reason, pride, ego, guilt, shame, whatever it was, they wouldn't put their hand up and ask for help. And usually it was because they didn't think there was any resources out there for them, or they thought they were the only ones out there struggling like that, and I can remember thinking like that, I can remember thinking I'm the only NFL player that's having all these issues, and out of guilt and shame, I wouldn't ask for help, but I knew they were out there. So I wanted to be, after I worked on myself for a long time, like a year, I started this nonprofit, and I started teaming up with the NFL. And we were going out and talking to these guys and getting the word out that they're not alone, that there are resources available. And man, they started coming out. Once I started sharing my story, they started coming out of the woodwork. And we've been able to help hundreds and hundreds of former players or family, and not just NFL guys, but, I started working with that. And we were working with former MLB guys and NHL and NBA, and man, pretty much every sport that has an organization that supports their former players is who I've been working with over the last 12 years. And, it was kind of God's way of keeping me connected to a game that I love so much. And who would have ever thought it would have been like this,
Sometimes your calling is different than you thought.
Never know. Right? Who'd have thunk it, right?
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned about getting yourself right, which a lot of people, when they go to therapy, they have to do. But then you decided to become a keynote public speaker. Now you got to share it to the masses. How was that for you? And then you start to travel around and stuff like that. When did you get comfortable with telling your story? And then what kind of feedback were you getting once you started doing that?
Man, and I can remember when I first got out of treatment, I went down to the Super Bowl in Miami. This was 2009, so 2010 Super Bowl. And I can remember sitting there with Conrad Dobler at a table right before my first time I was ever going to talk about it. And I was wondering, do I have the courage to do this? Can I really get through this? Can I do it without feeling shamed and all that? You know what? I did it. And I got such great response from it. There's so many people that were supporting me and everything that I was about. And it just kind of, it grew from there. And, I learned early in treatment that, you've got to be able to give it away to keep it. And so I've kind of always had that motto. And, if I could help one person, then it was all worth it. But, the Lord has put hundreds and hundreds of people in my path. And, I'm just grateful to be a small part of their journey.
That's awesome, man.
And you said it, man, it's life and death.
Yeah, No, it for sure is. Exactly. And now you got the book out too. So you're really been great about reaching or trying to reach as many people as possible. What's your speaking schedule like these days?
Well, and now that COVID's over, it's starting to pick up a little bit. It was going strong before COVID, and then it died off for a while. And you can only do so much virtual stuff, but
sure.
It's coming back now. We've picked up the schedule a little bit, and I love getting out there. I love meeting people, and now I have the book that I can also talk about in the back of the room after the speech. So it's a great opportunity to get out there and there's so much stigma surrounding this disease that it keeps people from raising their hands. It keeps families from raising their hands and asking for help. There's that guilt, there's that shame, there's those people that bury their head in the sand and think that if they just don't acknowledge it, that it's not really happening, or there's those parents that say, not my child, when
right.
It is your child. It is your child. So I love to get out there. I love to educate communities. I believe when communities get well, families get well. And when families get well, addicts get well. So, we've got so much to do, but I know you've noticed this in the last 3 to 5 years. There's been so many people coming forward now and saying, talking about the fact that it's okay to not be okay. You've seen it with Simone Biles. You've seen it with different celebrities and athletes. And more people, the conversation's getting easier to have about mental health issues. And, that's okay. And it is okay to not be okay, right. Because mental health and addiction does not discriminate, man. It affects everybody, Park Avenue to Park Bench.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's definitely for sure. There definitely is a stigma about athletes because they're supposed to be the toughest ones mentally, but it's not like they're still human. They're going through stuff too, whether it's family, whether it's, friends or whoever, just shady people in their life. There's a lot of stuff that athletes deal with, but the fans sometimes think what I see on the court or on the field, that's the guy I'm always supposed to get.
That's right. Yeah. And, we've recently just buried 2 Buccaneers, with Vincent Jackson and Keith McCants right here in Tampa. So, it's hit us hard here, but this is every community. This disease affects every community, every school, every college, every occupation. And, we're not going to legislate our way out of it. We're not going to arrest our way out of it, but we can educate our way out of it. And the more we talk about it, the more we spread that news, the more we tear down that stigma, then the closer we're going to get to fixing this thing.
Yeah, definitely. Last couple things. Just wanted to get this in there because obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the Super Bowl last year. So as a part of the Bucs family, what did that mean to you?
Oh man, it was so special. What was so bad was that the fact that COVID was around. So it was almost like a ghost town around Tampa. The parties were good and everybody did the best they could. But as far as the media stuff and everything that goes along with the Super Bowl and making it so cool, it was like a ghost town because the NFL pretty much had shut down everything because of that. So being out in Los Angeles this year and having all the media back and it was just it was good to see. It was like everybody's starting to live again, a little bit. Yeah, for sure. But still, the fact that Tampa had the Super Bowl at home, Tom Brady, all the great stuff that was going on last year, and of course winning it, and they never mailed me my ring though. I'm still waiting for my ring, man.
Are you supposed to get one?
No, I'm not.
I was going to say.
I deserve one, though, damn
it. You do. You put 10 years in. You should get an honorary ring.
Heck yeah.
No, that's cool, man. And yeah, that was the first time ever, I'm sure you know this, that a home Super Bowl has been won by the home team, which has never happened before. That's pretty cool.
And then it happened again this year.
Yeah, and then this year, exactly, same thing. Tampa's kind of hot right now. The Lightning won the championship. You got the Rays are pretty good, even though nobody goes to the games. It's a good sports town.
The Rays are awesome, and I live right by their stadium. I'm only about 2 miles away from their stadium, and they're a great team.
Yeah,
but yeah, even our Rowdies, the soccer team, they won it too. So yeah, Tampa was on fire last year and this year too.
Yeah, Tampa's title town right now. I just want to give you a chance.
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay. Last random football questions. Who some of the best defensive players that you ever went against that you can remember?
Oh man, I went against old school guys like Randy White, Joe Klecko, and Jim Burke, Michael Carter. You know, those guys, Joe Nash, you know, Jerry Ball. Those were Baumhauers of the world. You know, I played back in an era where head slaps were legal. You know,
right.
you could wrap up your arm and make a club out of it. You know, but we were able to get away with a lot more too as an offensive lineman. So it's all relative. But I played in a great era against a lot of great athletes, you know, Dan Hampton, the Fridge, you know, McMichaels, all that great 85 Chicago team, you know. I wouldn't change. I wouldn't trade anything, man. I played against some great players, had some great battles, played with some great players, and it was a great time, great era to be in.
Yeah,
that old black and blue NFC Central division. That was a rough one. The Packers, Minnesota, Detroit.
Because the divisions were different back then, right? As far as they were all where can everybody find your book, your social media channels, your website, all that stuff?
Hey, if you can't find me on social media, you're not trying very hard. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can go find the book at offcenterthebook.com. It has a link that'll take you to it, or you can go to amazon.com and just look up Off Center. Or you can find me on my website, which is proathletesinrecovery.org.
Okay, awesome. I will plug all those in the notes of the show. Randy, that was one of the most inspirational stories I've ever heard, man. I'm really glad you shared your story with me. I know you're getting very busy, so thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'll tell Garrett you said hello.
Definitely do that.
I'll do it. Y'all should hook up.
Yeah. No, I'll hit him up on the side. Yeah, for sure.
Good. All right, man. I appreciate you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that is some big time stuff there. I really hope you guys got something out of that. Just kind of reminder, everybody's going through something, but the people that are going through something extra along those lines of addiction, please ask for help. Please, like Randy says, raise your hand. It's not worth going through it alone, whether it's through addiction or therapy, or you need help in life or anything like that. Use me as a resource. I got plenty of people to send you to if you have nobody, but please raise your hand if you guys need help in life. I think this episode was a huge reminder of that. So with that said, my thanks to Randy Grimes. What an incredible episode, and awesome to have him on. And thanks to everybody who helped bring him on, Sonia and Celeste. I appreciate you guys. Wow, that was great. That was a great episode, and I hope you guys really dove in on his story. And he's speaking around the country now, and he's, check him out online, all of his places. His new book is called Off Center. Check that out wherever you guys can. It's great material. So anyways, my thanks to Randy. Awesome episode with him. As always, you can follow me at Too Tall Sports Podcast. That's on Instagram. On Twitter, it's at Too Tall Sports. Check me out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, all Too Tall Sports Podcast. Wherever you can, subscribe, rate, review, like, share, comment, all that stuff. Send it to a friend. Tell them to listen if you think it's worth listening to. And of course, 5 stars wherever you can, because I'm giving you 5-star content every single episode. You know this. You already know. So anyway, hit me up there. Like, I'm also on TikTok at Too Tall Sports Podcast. You can check out my stuff there. I make funny videos and I put them on Instagram as well. So I do lots of sports updates, but also like fun stuff as well. So it's not so serious all the time. But anyway, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next week for another great episode. Have a good day.